Hello, I am Dr. D.D. Sawant from Department of Geography, J.A.T Arts, Science and Commerce College for Women, Malegaon District, Nashik. The today's topic which I had selected, that is a carbon cycle. The carbon which moves in the biosphere through various pathways which has three phases of its storage and movement. For example, number one, that is a gaseous phase in which carbon is present as gas CO2 in the atmosphere. Second one, that is a liquid phase which includes dissolved carbon dioxide in water, and third phase, that is a solid phase which includes carbon stored in the sediments, fossil fuels and organic matter. The movement of carbon in solid and liquid forms and as carbon dioxide, means the gaseous form, is of particular interest as it makes up around 50% of organic matter by dry weight, and its movement within the biosphere are closely bound up with the flow of energy. The carbon cycle involving the circulation of carbon with the biosphere includes two pathways or cycles. Number one, that is a gaseous cycle, which involves the movement of carbon as carbon dioxide, which is found as free gas in the atmosphere and as a gas dissolved in the water of the land and of the seas and oceans. Second, that is a non gaseous or inorganic cycle, involves the solid phase of carbon wherein it resides in carbohydrates molecules. Its atomic number, that is a CH2O, in the organic matter as hydrocarbon compounds in the rocks of the earth crust as in coal, etc., and as minerals carbonate compounds such as calcium carbonate. Here the processes that transfer carbon in between the earth system as a photosynthesis, respiration, consumption, decomposition, combustion means a burning, withering which occurs due to rock breakdown and release carbon, dissolve या vaporize it between ocean and atmosphere, and deposition. So while discussing to this carbon cycle, the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere pool enters the biological cycle through the process of photosynthesis wherein carbon, hydrogen and oxygen are combined by the autotrophic green plants of the terrestrial and marine ecosystems with the help of sunlight, and thus organic compounds are formed. The flow of energy and elements in the ecosystem, that is the biosphere, is controlled by different components of the system. The component which issues energy or element is called donor component, and the component which receives energy or elements is called recipient component. In the case of the carbon cycle in the biosphere, the transfer of carbon from the atmospheric pool or reservoir, which means a donor component, to the living organisms or organic reservoir is both donor control and recipient control. The rate of uptake of carbon dioxide by green plants, means the recipients, from the atmospheric reservoir depends on the density of plants and their activities and on the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and other environmental factors as like as light, water, nutrients, etc., and processes which are donor controlled. Thus, the carbon dioxide assimilated by plants is stored in the woody tissues of plants. This is called as organic reservoir of carbon. Forests, mainly tropical evergreen rainforest, temperate evergreen and deciduous forest, and the boreal forest are significant storages or reservoirs of biological carbon of the biosphere. Carbon is released from the living organisms due to breakdown of carbohydrates during respiration. The respiration by the biota transforms organic compounds to gaseous carbon dioxide, which is returned back to the atmosphere. Carbon is retained to the biosphere at about the same speed as it is removed. But in recent years, the carbon concentration in the atmosphere has been increasing. Some of the carbohydrates, it means that the chemical energy produced by the heterotrophic plants at tropic level, are consumed by the herbivorous animals and carnivorous animals at tropic level 3 and 4, and these heterotrophic animals release carbon as carbon dioxide due to breakdown of their carbohydrates during respiration. So, as a decomposition of fallen leaf litter and dead organic tissues of both plants and animals by decomposers oxidize further carbon to carbon dioxide, which is returned back to the atmosphere. Some carbon is released as CO2 due to burning of vegetation and animals as it returned back to the atmospheric reservoir. The microbes or decomposers also release carbon in gaseous form through respiration, and they decompose dead organic tissues. So, some carbon goes to the sediments below the ground surface and is stored as in sedimentary reservoir. Some of the dead organic matter is also stored in the soil or in deep sea sediments for longer period of geological time. The terrestrial organic matter is transported to the oceans by the geological processes in the form of dissolved or particulate organic matter. The geological processes includes river, winds, glaciers, etc. The organic material brought to the oceans are generally converted into rocks, and thus carbon enters the sedimentary phase. Hence, the sedimentary reservoir or geological reservoir stores carbon mainly in the form of inorganic carbonates and to some extent in the form of peat, soil, or coal or animals. For example, cells, bones, etc. Remains or mineral oil. Carbon has a long residence time in the sedimentary phase because it remains stored in the sedimentary reservoirs for fairly a longer period of geological time. Hence, the carbon from the sedimentary phase may be released only when either the rocks are withered and eroded. The fossil fuels, coal, peat, petroleum, and natural gas, are burned during their uses in the factories, automobiles, or domestic affairs. Carbon released from the sedimentary reservoirs, it means through weathering and erosion of rocks, burning of fossil fuels, and volcanic eruptions. So it goes back to the atmospheric reservoirs, but this sedimentary cycle of carbon takes much longer time of geological time scale. So the movement of carbon in the marine ecosystem is much simpler. Atmospheric carbon dioxide is taken by the marine heterotrophic phytoplanktons who transform carbon together with oxygen and hydrogen into carbohydrates. During the process of photosynthesis, some portion of carbon stored in phytoplanktons goes to sedimentary storages after their death. Some portion is transformed into organic matter to form petroleum and natural gas, and some portion is transferred to marine animals when they feed on phytoplanktons, and so such animals which feed on zooplanktons, and hence some portion of carbohydrates stored in the marine animals is broken down during respiration, and thus carbon is released from marine animals as carbon dioxide, which is returned back to the atmospheric reservoir. The remaining portion of the carbon of marine organisms goes to sedimentary reservoir as carbonate, sediments, and hydrocarbons. Hence, the carbon stored in the sedimentary reservoirs may be released to the atmosphere after a long period of geological time scale through weathering and volcanic eruption. So, here I conclude my lecture. Thank you. Thank you very much.